It was 9 degrees above freezing on the morning of April 7th in Richmond, Virginia, and I was standing in the parking lot of Wynn Prestige Auto on West Broad Street, holding a set of keys that had been handed to me 40 minutes earlier across a conference table on East Carey Street by an attorney who had not made eye contact with anyone during the entire signing. Ela was beside me with her tablet in its yellow case, already filming. She had been filming since we left the house that morning. She filmed me eating cereal at the kitchen table. She filmed the drive down Monument Avenue. She filmed the parking garage exit and the turn onto East Carey Street and the elevator up to the law firm and the conference room and the documents and the moment the keys moved across the table. She filmed everything because she had learned, over the previous 90 days, that everything was part of the story. I was 42 years old. I owned a 3-bay restoration shop on Williamsburg Road that my daughter had turned into a 47 million view YouTube channel without telling me. I was standing in the parking lot of the most prominent pre-owned luxury dealership in Richmond, Virginia, which I now owned 40% of, because a woman named Patricia Wynn had decided 90 days earlier that the best way to make me feel small was to dump 12 broken cars at my door. Bobby Okafor was already in the parking lot when we arrived. He had driven over early and was standing near the service bay entrance with a coffee in each hand, wearing the same canvas jacket he wore to everything, looking at the building with the evaluating attention of a man who has spent 30 years fixing things and is mentally beginning the list. He held out a coffee when I walked over. I took it. He said, "Nice building." I said, "It needs work." He said, "Always does." 90 days earlier, on a Monday morning in January, Patricia Wynn had arrived at my shop on 3 car carrier trucks with 12 cars she could not sell, and a performance she had been preparing for 2 weeks. She had an audience arranged. She had a story ready. She had a tone that communicated everything she wanted communicated without requiring her to say it directly. What she did not have, what she could not have accounted for, was Ela on her stool with a tablet and the specific instinct of an 8-year-old who understood, without being told, that what was about to happen was worth keeping. Ela posted the first video that night. The rest, as they say, followed. I need to tell you about my grandfather first, because he is in this story, even though he died before any of it happened. Earl Mercer bought a 1968 Pontiac GTO new off the lot in Richmond in the spring of that year. He was 22 years old. He had saved for 2 years, working at a warehouse on the south side, living at home, not spending money on anything that wasn't necessary. And on a Thursday afternoon in April 1968, he drove that car off the lot and never sold it. He kept it in the driveway of the house in Church Hill where he lived for 51 years. He worked on it every Saturday morning from 8 until 11, not because it needed 3 hours of maintenance every week, but because working on it was the thing he did on Saturday mornings, and the car was the object of that practice. He knew every bolt. He knew what the engine sounded like when something was slightly off in a way that would become a problem in 6 months if not addressed, and he addressed it before it became one. He told me one thing that I have thought about every working day since I was 8 years old, standing beside him in that driveway on a Saturday morning in 1990, watching him work. He said, "You see how I do this? Not fast, not slow, just correct, always correct." He was talking about a valve adjustment. He might as well have been talking about everything. I grew up in Church Hill on Richmond's east side. The same house, the same driveway, the same GTO under the same cover on Saturday mornings. My father was not mechanically inclined and did not pretend to be, which I respected. My mother worked at the Richmond city government for 30 years. They were steady people who provided a steady life and supported without reservation the strange single-mindedness their son developed for anything with an engine. After high school in 2000, I went to work at a body shop in Henrico County. Started as a prep technician, the lowest position, the one that teaches you every step of every job by requiring you to set up for someone else to do it. Moved to paint, moved to structural repair, spent 15 years working for other people's shops, accumulating knowledge the way you accumulate it in trade work, slowly, through repetition, through making mistakes and correcting them and not making them again. I opened Mercer Auto Restoration in 2015 at 33 years old. Leased space, 3 bays, a hand-painted sign, a parking lot that held 8 cars if people were cooperative about their angles. I specialized in restoration and mechanical work on pre-owned vehicles. Not a dealership, not a high-volume operation. A shop where cars came in broken and left correct. I met Anna in 2011. She was a kindergarten teacher, patient and direct and constitutionally unable to let anything imprecise pass without noting it, which made her both the easiest and most demanding person I had ever spent time with. We married in 2014. Idla was born in 2016. Anna died in March 2020 from a brain tumor, 14 months from the diagnosis call on a Tuesday evening to the end. Idla was 4 years old. I closed the shop for 2 weeks. Then I opened it again because it was what I had, and Idla needed me present, and the work required my complete attention, which was the only thing that made the days manageable in the first year. Idla grew up at the shop. She had a stool near the window that looked into the main bay. A tall wooden stool with a cushion that Margaret Chen from next door had made from fabric Isla chose herself, dark blue with small white stars. She sat on it on Saturdays and school holidays with her tablet and her library books, and she watched me work with the focused attention of a child who had decided this was worth paying attention to. She started filming in August 2023. Nothing planned. She pointed her tablet at me working on a 1972 Chevelle restoration one Saturday afternoon because she wanted to keep it. She posted one clip to YouTube because her friend Maya had a YouTube channel and it seemed like a reasonable thing to do. By January 2024, that clip had 42 views. Most of them were probably clients. Patricia Wynn had founded Wynn Prestige Auto on West Broad Street in Richmond in 2001 at 33 years old. 23 years of operation. A showroom that had been renovated twice. A service department that employed 8 technicians. A reputation in the Richmond market built on European luxury, American muscle, and the specific social capital that comes from being the place where a certain kind of Richmond buyer went when they wanted a certain kind of car. She was good at what she had built. I want to say that clearly because the story of what happened between us is not the story of a bad business person failing. It is the story of a person who confused the categories she had built for sorting people with an accurate understanding of people, and who paid a significant price for that confusion. Patricia's system for categorizing the Richmond automotive business community was efficient and largely accurate. High-volume dealerships were one category, specialty shops were another, independent restoration operations were a third, useful for referrals on specific work, not serious, competitive, or professional peers. Troy Mercer's shop on Williamsburg Road fit cleanly into the third category and had been there since the first time Patricia had been aware of it. In 2022, I had declined to purchase auction vehicles from Wynn Prestige at prices Patricia had set that I had assessed as above market value. I had said so directly. She had expected a negotiation. I had said no. That was the end of the conversation from my side. From her side, it was apparently the beginning of a different one. By December 2023, Wynn Prestige Auto had a problem. 12 vehicles, acquired through Copart and IAAI insurance auctions over the previous 18 months, had proven more difficult to remediate than Patricia's team had assessed at purchase. 3 with flood damage more extensive than their auction grades indicated. 4 with mechanical failures that exceeded the repair budgets her service team had set. 3 with structural issues that triggered disclosure requirements complicating resale. 2 that were simply wrong purchases in terms of market demand. They were occupying bay space and lot space. They were not generating revenue. They were a cost that had been on the books too long. Patricia's decision to deliver them to my shop was made over December and refined in January. She would frame it as surplus inventory sharing. Generous, collegial, the kind of thing a successful operation does for a smaller one. The framing was deliberate. Everything about the delivery was deliberate. She arranged 3 car carrier trucks, the kind that stack vehicles on 2 levels, each one capable of hauling 4 cars. She called her business partner Dennis and 2 contacts in the Richmond automotive community. She arrived at Mercer Auto Restoration on Williamsburg Road on the morning of January 8, 2024, at 9 a.m. Isla was at the shop. School had a delayed start, a water main issue, and she had come in with me that morning and was on her stool with her tablet when the first carrier pulled in. Patricia stepped out of her Range Rover in a camel wool coat. Dennis was beside her. Her 2 contacts were near the trucks. She looked at me, and she had the warm and entirely constructed expression of someone delivering a favor they have arranged for maximum visibility. She said, clearly, with Dennis and her contacts in earshot, with my 2 employees who had come to see what the carriers were, with Hila on her stool near the window, that she was bringing me something to work with, that her inventory management had produced some surplus project vehicles and that she thought a shop like mine could use the material. She said that she hated to see good talent go to waste for lack of inventory. She said it with the specific precision of someone who has chosen every word for what it implies rather than what it states. I looked at the carriers. I looked at Patricia. I said, "Thank you." 2 words. Nothing more. I turned and told my employee Marcus to start moving the cars into the bays for assessment. Patricia waited for something additional. There was nothing additional. She left. Isla had been filming since the first carrier pulled in. She filmed the trucks unloading. She filmed the cars being moved. She filmed her father walking around each car with a notebook and a flashlight without hurrying and without expression. She filmed the moment Patricia's Range Rover left the parking lot. That evening, after dinner, while I was back at the shop doing initial assessments, Isla uploaded the footage to her YouTube channel. She added a title the way she added titles to everything, simply, without overthinking it. My dad just got 12 broken cars dumped at his shop. Watch what he does with them. She went to bed. The video had 4,000 views by the time she woke up. She had written a title that YouTube's algorithm apparently found interesting. 4,000 people had clicked on it before 8 a.m. on a Tuesday morning in January without knowing anything about the channel or the shop or the story behind either. They clicked because the title asked a question they wanted answered. I spent the first 2 days on systematic assessment. Every car documented, every fault identified, every repair requirement estimated against realistic sale value. I had been doing this for 24 years, and the process was the same regardless of the car. You looked at what was there without deciding in advance what you were looking at, and you wrote down what you found. The 12 cars were a mixed situation. 3 late-model European luxury sedans with flood damage, a 2021 BMW 5 Series, a 2020 Mercedes E-Class, and a 2019 Audi A7. I assessed 2 as remediable within a reasonable budget. The third, the Audi, had water intrusion into the transmission control module and the instrument cluster so extensive that the repair cost exceeded the realistic sale value. I set it aside for parts. Parts from the Audi sold within 8 days through my existing network for more than the car would have brought as a running vehicle. 4 vehicles with mechanical failures. A 2019 Porsche Macan with a seized engine. The previous owner had run it without oil, which ends engines in a specific and irreversible way if caught too late, and a specific and very reversible way if caught early enough. This one was borderline. I decided it was worth the work. A 2020 Jaguar F-Pace with a catastrophic automatic transmission failure, a 2018 Land Rover Discovery with a compromised air suspension that had collapsed on the driver's side and been driven on in that condition long enough to cause secondary damage to the control arms and the rear diff mounts. A 2017 Maserati Ghibli with electrical system failures so extensive that 2 previous shops had given up on it. I looked at the Maserati for a long time. I had worked on Maseratis before. Their electrical architecture was not as complicated as its reputation suggested if you approached it without the anxiety the reputation produced. 3 vehicles with structural issues. A 2020 Mercedes GLE with a rear quarter that had been improperly repaired after a collision. The kind of repair that passes a visual inspection and fails a structural one. A 2019 BMW X5 with a bent subframe from an undisclosed impact that had been filled and painted over. A 2018 Audi Q7 with a compromised firewall from a front-end collision that should have totaled the car and had instead been patched well enough to pass a casual inspection. 2 beyond economic repair. A 2018 Jaguar XJ with water intrusion so complete that the entire electrical architecture was unsalvageable, and a 2016 Maserati Quattroporte with a seized engine and structural corrosion in the frame rails. I stripped both for parts. Between the 2, I recovered more in components than Patricia had paid for either car at auction. Bobby Okafor arrived on day 3. Bobby was 55 years old and had spent 30 years in auto body work, the last 12 as the lead structural repair specialist at a collision center in Henrico County that worked with 3 major insurance carriers. He retired in 2020. He lived 4 blocks from my house. We had known each other for 19 years, and he was the person I called when I needed someone whose opinion I trusted completely. He had seen Isla's video on the evening of January 9th. His daughter had sent him the link. He watched it twice. Then he called me. He said, "I'm coming in tomorrow." I said, "I'm not paying you." He said, "I know." A pause. "I'll want coffee." He showed up at 7 a.m. on day 3 in his canvas jacket and went directly to the Mercedes GLE structural repair without asking which car to start on. He had already assessed from watching Isla's videos which repair needed the most experienced hands first. I had not told him that. He had figured it out himself. That was Bobby. Isla filmed every afternoon. School days she came to the shop at 3:15 and filmed for 90 minutes before doing homework in the office. She filmed the work the way she filmed everything. Honestly, without staging, without narration. She filmed me lying under the BMW 5 Series with a flashlight in my hand, working a connector that had seized from water damage. She filmed Bobby doing the GLE framework, the methodical process of removing the improper repair down to bare metal and beginning again correctly. She filmed the shop at 7 a.m. before anyone arrived, the cars in the bays, the tools laid out, the January light coming through the high windows. She posted every video with simple titles. Day 7, Porsche engine out. Day 14, Mercedes framework. Day 21, Jaguar transmission complete. The channel had 42 subscribers on January 8th. On January 28th, day 21, it had 61,000. I did not know this until Margaret Chen came over on a Saturday afternoon in late January with her laptop. Margaret was 61 years old, a retired accountant who had been doing my shopbook since 2019 and who had the specific quality of someone who had spent 35 years working with numbers and had learned to distinguish between numbers that told a true story and numbers that told a convenient one. She sat down at my kitchen table and turned the laptop toward me. I looked at the screen. Then I looked at her. I said, "How?" She said, "Your daughter." I was quiet for a moment. Isla was in the living room. I could hear her moving around. Margaret said, "Troy, someone needs to manage this." I looked at the screen for another moment. The subscriber count. The view counts on each video. The comments section. I scrolled through it briefly. People writing about their fathers. People writing about their own shops. People writing about watching someone do something correctly as if the correctness itself was the thing they had come for. I said, "I have 12 cars to finish." I went back to the shop. Margaret managed it. The Maserati Ghibli took 11 days. I want to tell you about those 11 days because they are the center of what happened. Not the acquisition, not the subscriber count, not the keys in the parking lot on April 7th. 11 days on a car that 2 shops had given up on, working through an electrical system that had been incorrectly diagnosed and incorrectly repaired twice before I touched it. The Ghibli's electrical failures were not random. They had a source, a water intrusion point behind the left rear taillight assembly that had been resealed improperly after a previous repair, allowing moisture to enter the harness running to the rear body control module. The moisture had caused progressive corrosion across 17 circuits over an estimated period of 2 years. Each circuit failure had triggered a cascade of error codes that the previous shops had attempted to address individually, which was the wrong approach. The error codes were symptoms. The source was the water and the corroded harness. I found the source on day 4 of the Ghibli work, day 18 of the overall project. I was lying on my back in the rear of the car with a multimeter, a wiring diagram I had printed from an online technical resource, and a flashlight, working through each circuit methodically from the suspected intrusion point outward. Isla was filming. The moment I identified the source, I did not say anything dramatic. I said, "There it is." To no one in particular. To the car, maybe. The way you say something when you have been looking for a thing and found it, and the finding is its own sufficient event. Isla had the tablet pointed at the rear of the car. She kept filming. That clip, 7 minutes and 14 seconds of watching a man find the source of a problem that had defeated 2 previous shops, work through it systematically, and fix it correctly, was watched 11 million times in 22 days. I did not watch it until Margaret showed it to me 3 weeks later. When I watched it, I was mostly checking that Isla had stayed warm enough in the shop. She had been wearing her blue down jacket. She was fine. On February 6th, day 29, my phone rang with a Charlotte area code I didn't recognize. The man on the other end said his name was James Whitmore. He said he was the managing partner of Whitmore Capital Partners, a private equity firm in Charlotte that specialized in automotive retail acquisitions. He said he had watched 14 of Isla's videos in a single evening. I was in the shop. Bobby was working behind me on the BMW X5 subframe repair. Isla was on her stool. James said he had been evaluating the Richmond automotive retail market for 8 months. That Wynn Prestige Auto had been on his radar as an acquisition target for 6 of those 8 months. That the dealership was in financial difficulty that was not publicly known but was visible to anyone conducting proper due diligence. That he had been looking for the right operational partner before proceeding. He said he had found his operational partner. I said, "I'm a restoration shop. I don't operate dealerships." He said, "You're a man who took 12 cars that a dealership couldn't handle and has turned 10 of them into revenue in 29 days. That's what a dealership operator is." I said I would think about it. He said, "Take the time you need. I'll be here." I ended the call. Bobby had stopped working at some point and was looking at me. Isla was looking at me. Bobby said, "Who is that?" I said, "Someone from Charlotte." Bobby looked at me for a moment. Then he went back to the subframe. That evening I called Margaret. I told her what James Whitmore had said. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Send me his firm's information. I'll look at it tonight." She called me back at 10:45 p.m. She said, "Whitmore Capital is real. 17 years, 12 dealership acquisitions, clean record with the SEC. The structure he's proposing is standard for this kind of deal." A pause. "Troy, this is what happens when you're good at something and someone is paying attention." I said I would call him back in the morning. Margaret said, "Call him back tonight. People who are paying attention don't always wait." I called him back at 11 p.m. We talked for 40 minutes. The structure was straightforward. Whitmore Capital Partners would acquire Wynn Prestige Auto. The real estate, the inventory, the business license, the existing contracts. I would become the operating partner with 40% equity and full operational authority. James would retain 60% as the silent financial partner. The acquisition price was $2.8 million. Patricia had been quietly seeking a buyer since October 2023. The dealership's commercial real estate loan had been called in September. A floor plan financing arrangement had been restructured under unfavorable terms in November. 2 senior staff members had left in the fall. The business that had operated successfully for 23 years had encountered a convergence of financial pressures that had become unmanageable over a period of 8 months. She had 3 offers on the table by February. James's was the highest. It moved the fastest. Patricia's attorney called her on February 19th to tell her which firm had submitted the accepted offer and to provide the name of the operating partner. She asked him to repeat the name. He did. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Process it." I spent 2 weeks in March walking every inch of the Wynn Prestige facility. The showroom, the service bays, the parts department, the back office, the lot. I assessed it the way I assessed anything unfamiliar, methodically without deciding in advance what I was looking at, writing down what I found. I found 11 things that needed immediate correction. I documented them in a report that I gave to James, who said it was the most thorough operational assessment he had received in 17 years of acquisitions. I did not tell him it was the same process I used for every car that came into my shop. It was the same process. Margaret handled the legal documentation on my behalf, not as my attorney but as my navigator, reading everything, asking the questions that needed to be asked, flagging the clauses that needed flagging. She billed me nothing for this. I told her I would settle it later. She said there was nothing to settle. Bobby ran the Williamsburg Road shop through the due diligence period. He had become the shop manager by function before either of us acknowledged it formally. He did not ask for the title. He simply held it with the same quality he brought to everything. Quietly, correctly, without drawing attention to it. Hila continued filming. By the end of March, the channel had 4 million subscribers. The Maserati clip had 11 million views. A video Hila had made of the finished BMW 5 Series, clean, running, the before and after documented in 6 minutes, had been watched 8 million times. Comments came in from everywhere. Restoration shop owners who had been in the business for decades. People who had never touched a car in their lives but kept watching. A retired Ford engineer in Michigan who said the systematic approach reminded him of the best technicians he had worked with at the factory. Dozens of people who wrote some version of the same thing. I don't know why I can't stop watching this, but I can't. I read some of the comments. Not all of them. The work was what mattered. The comments were people responding to the work, which I appreciated, but the work itself did not change based on who was watching. It was the same work either way. It was always the same work. The closing was April 7th, year 2024. 9 a.m., a conference room at a law firm on East Carey Street in Richmond. I arrived with Margaret. James Whitmore arrived with his legal team. Patricia Wynn arrived with her attorney. She sat across the table. She did not look at me when she came in. She arranged her documents in front of her with the efficiency of someone who has decided to complete something and is focused entirely on completion. I looked at her. I thought about January 8th, the camel coat, the 3 car carrier trucks, the performance she had prepared, the 2 words I had said in response. I thought about Isla on her stool with the tablet. I thought about 11 days on a Maserati electrical system, and Bobby at 7 a.m. with 2 coffees, and Margaret at my kitchen table with her laptop. I did not say anything to Patricia. There was nothing to say that the transaction was not already saying more precisely and more completely than I could have said it. She signed the documents. Her attorney collected them. She stood. She walked to the door. At the door, she stopped. She turned back and looked at me. The first time she had looked directly at me since she arrived. She looked at me for a moment with the expression of someone who has finished processing something and has arrived at a position they are not going to share with the room. Then she left. Her attorney followed. The door closed. Margaret looked at me across the table. She did not say anything. She had the expression of a person who has just watched something conclude correctly and finds the conclusion sufficient. I picked up the keys. We drove to West Broad Street. Isla in the passenger seat with her tablet in its yellow case, already filming. Margaret following in her Subaru. Bobby already in the parking lot when we arrived. 2 coffees, canvas jacket, looking at the building. I got out of the truck. Bobby handed me the coffee. I looked at the building. The showroom, the service bays, the lot with its current inventory. I thought about what needed to be done and in what order. Isla was filming. She filmed me looking at the building. She filmed Bobby and me standing with our coffees. She filmed Margaret walking the perimeter of the lot with her reading glasses on and her notebook out, already making notes. She filmed the April morning light on the showroom glass. After a while, she said, "Can I post this one?" I looked at her. "Post what?" She showed me the screen. She had been filming since we left the house, the cereal, the drive, the law firm, the keys, all of it. I looked at the screen for a moment, the building behind me in the frame, the keys in my hand. I said, "Yeah, post it." She posted it from the parking lot. Within 6 hours it had 2 million views. 6 weeks later, a Saturday morning in mid-May, I was at Mercer Auto Restoration on Williamsburg Road. Bobby was running the day-to-day with Carl as senior technician. They had the shop organized and operating at a standard that required nothing from me on a daily basis, which was the correct outcome. I came in on Saturdays because the Williamsburg Road shop was where I had learned what I knew, and I was not ready to stop being present in it. Isla was on her stool with her tablet reading comments on the April 7th video. It had 47 million views by mid-May. She read some of the comments aloud while I worked. I listened. A car had come in that week, a 1969 Pontiac GTO, referred by a client of Bobby's, needing everything. Engine, suspension, bodywork, interior. The kind of car that takes as long as it takes and cannot be hurried and will be right when it is right and not before. The same year as Earl's. I had noticed this when it came in. I had not mentioned it to anyone. Idla read a comment from someone who said their father had been a mechanic and had died years ago, and they had not thought about him in a long time until they started watching the videos, and now they thought about him every day. I was looking at the GTO's engine. I did not respond to this. Isla said, "People really like watching you work." I said, "I know." She said, "I think it's because you don't stop." I looked up from the engine. I looked at my daughter on her stool with her tablet in its yellow case, in the shop where she had spent more Saturday mornings than she had spent anywhere else, and I thought about a driveway in Church Hill and a Saturday morning in 1990 and an 8-year-old boy standing beside a man who was doing a valve adjustment on a 1968 GTO at a pace that was not fast and not slow. Not fast, not slow, just correct. Always correct. I looked at the 1969 GTO in the bay. Then I went back to work. Before you go, I want to ask you something. Is there someone who watched you work when you were young? A parent, a grandparent, someone whose hands knew things their words couldn't say, and taught you something that you're still using today? Because that thing they gave you, that patience, that standard, that refusal to cut corners, it doesn't stay with just you. It passes forward. Who passed it to you? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. If this story stayed with you today, share it with one person who needs to hear it. You already know who that is. And if you're new here, subscribe. Every week a story like this one. Real people, real decisions, the kind that stay with you.